Hey guys, tonight we slip backward through time, past the glow of your phone screen, past the buzz of traffic outside your window, until the air thickens with wood smoke and horse sweat. You're standing just beyond a medieval city gate, the kind of place that once made travelers gasp in awe. But hold your breath, because all smells suspiciously like manure right now. The morning mist tastes of ash and old cabbage, and the street beyond is already shouting in languages you half understand. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments side. Love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint as sunlight catches the iron hinges of the gate. The massive doors creak open for the morning rush, and people surge like water through a dam. You're pressed between a farmer's cart full of turnips and a monk humming what sounds like Gregorian trap music. The crowd smells like wool, sweat, and a faint note of despair. Welcome to your first medieval morning. Your sneakers, oh, wait, you don't have those, are replaced by stiff leather shoes that feel like punishment. The road beneath you isn't really a road. It's a hard mix of dirt, straw, and whatever the horses left behind. You sidestep a puddle, except it's not water. The smell confirms your worst suspicion. Joke number 1. The medieval city had no pooping zone. The entire world was the zone. The gatekeeper eyes you suspiciously, his chainmail glinting. He mutters something about a toll, and you realize the concept of free entry hasn't been invented yet. The average medieval town charged travelers a small for, occasionally a chicken, for the privilege of walking in. You pat your empty purse. Good luck convincing him with your smartphone. It's not exactly accepted currency. You're finally allowed through, okay? And the full chaos of city life hits you like a loot to the face. Bakers shouting, dogs barking, and a distant bell tolling from the church tower. That bell is your clock, because mechanical clocks are rare luxuries, and sundials aren't great in cloudy weather. Historians still argue whether the first truly public mechanical clock was built in the 13th or 14th century. But either way, you're measuring time by sound and shadow. You notice quickly how everyone seems to know their place. The rich merchants strut in dyed fabrics, while peasants wear shades of mud, literally. Social class is stitched into every thread, and your plain tunic screams outsider. Eyes follow you, curious, maybe a bit predatory. You remember reading that medieval cities could be surprisingly diverse to raiders from the Middle East, Africa, and all over Europe, but that doesn't mean strangers are always welcomed. Suspicion was practically a civic duty. The air is busy with smells, bread baking, meat roasting, and open latrines fermenting in the sun. The human nose was built to survive, but yours pampered by air fresheners and filtered offices waves, a little white flag. Joke number 2. If this were a VR simulation, you'd be searching for the odor intensity slider right about now. You hear a shout and leap aside just as a cart barrels through. Oxen don't have brakes, and pedestrians are basically considered speed bumps with opinions. The cobblestones rattle as the cart hits a rut, and the barrel topples off, bursting open to reveal salted fish. The driver swears creatively and hurries to scoop up his stock, brushing off the dirt. Yes, that fish will still be sold. You suddenly lose your appetite for dinner. A group of children dart between legs, laughing and chasing a wooden hoop. One stops to stare at your strange posture because you keep covering your nose, and asks something about whether you're ill. Illness here isn't a casual topic. It's practically a lifestyle. Please are your new roommates, and your immune system is about to get the worst Airbnb rating imaginable. But the city's heartbeat is vibrant. You pass craftsmen hammering metal, women spinning wool, and a scribe hunched under a canopy copying a manuscript by hand. A real historical fact for you. In the 14th century, skilled scribe could take months to complete a single book, each letter drawn with precision and prayer. That's why your medieval Netflix subscription consists entirely of gossip. You glance up as pigeons wheel above. Someone tosses a bucket from an upper window. You step aside just in time. Congratulations, you've avoided your first chamber pot incident. Fun tidbit. Some towns had specific hours when it was legal to dump waste out the window, often accompanied by a warning cry like Garde-à-l'eau from the French Garde es l'eau. Watch out for the water. Historians still argue whether these warnings were genuinely courteous or just comedic timing. Either way, medieval sidewalks were obstacle courses of surprise liquids. The gate behind you closes with a deep thud, sealing you in. There's a weird comfort in the sound. It means the city is alive, defended, structured, but it also means you're stuck until evening when the gates reopen. Imagine your morning commute locked in with a few thousand people, no plumbing, and open fires. Yeah, you wouldn't last a day. You wander toward a fountain at the square's center. It's water, cloudy, but cool. People fill clay jugs, chatting about taxes and the weather, which in medieval times are practically the same thing. A merchant mutters about the king raising levies again. You remember something from a history documentary. Taxation was often collected in kind grain, cloth, even animals. There's no such thing as direct deposit here. The IRS comes with a spear. A nearby friar preaches about sin, his voice competing with the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The rhythm of the place is hypnotic. Metal on metal, bell on bell, human on chaos. For a moment, you almost feel like you belong. Then you sneeze loudly and everyone turns. Superstition prickles through the crowd like static. Someone mutters about evil spirits escaping through noses. Joke number 3. Bless, you might actually be a literal exorcism here. You back away slowly, pretending to admire the architecture. The city gate looms distant now, and beyond it, the open fields shimmer with morning haze. You think about leaving, but where would you go? Outside, the countryside holds wolves, bandits, and fewer toilets, if that's even possible. Inside, at least, there's bread, or something resembling it. The sun climbs higher, painting the rooftops gold. You feel a tug between fascination and discomfort. Everything here is beautiful in a gritty, almost cinematic way. But every beauty has a smell, a risk, a rule you don't yet know. You realize that this city isn't designed for comfort, it's designed for survival. And survival here means accepting dirt as a roommate and danger as your daily planner. Your modern brain wants order, sanitation, Wi-Fi. The medieval world offers none of those, but it hums with raw, messy life. As you take one last breath of smoky morning air, your stomach rumbles. Time to find breakfast, if your nose can handle it. The smell leads you before your curiosity does. You follow the smoky air down a winding street where the noise of bargaining rises like a chorus. You've stumbled into the heart of the market, the medieval equivalent of your grocery store, shopping mall, and neighborhood drama network rolled into one pungent plaza. Stalls crowd every corner, their cloth canopies flapping, their merchants shouting prices that sound suspiciously flexible. You step carefully through mud that looks suspiciously more biological than geological, passing barrels of pickled herring and wheels of cheese that might still be alive. A butcher wipes his hands on his apron, which looks like it survived a few wars. Fresh meat, he declares proudly, slapping the side of something that used to moo, oink, or possibly both. You can't tell, and you don't want to. You hover near a baker's stall. The bread smells heavenly, but one look tells you it's rock hard. That's because medieval bakers often reused dough, baking yesterday's leftovers into today's loaves. It's edible, but only if your teeth are stronger than your morals. You remember reading that bread wasn't just food, it was a social indicator. White loaves were for the rich, coarse brown ones for everyone else. You're definitely in brown bread territory. A woman selling vegetables waves at you with dirt-caked fingers. Her produce looks honest, which is to say, half-eaten. She slices a carrot open to show you the good part, smiling proudly. Food waste isn't an option. Here every scrap counts. You buy one just to be polite, but she throws in something else for free. Advice: don't drink the milk today, she warns. Smells fine now, but wait an hour. You nod, deciding to skip the dairy altogether. You catch sight of another stall selling medicinal tonics. Bottles filled with cloudy liquid gleam in the sunlight. The merchant, with a beard long enough to hide small animals in, claims his potion can cure plague, heartbreak, and laziness. You raise an eyebrow. He notices and leans close. It's got real ingredients, he insists. Vinegar, wormwood, and a touch of dried toad. You manage not to laugh out loud. Fun tidbit: many medieval medicines genuinely included ingredients like ground gemstones, animal parts, or, yes, toads. Historians still argue whether these mixtures worked through placebo or sheer intimidation. You take a cautious step away, nearly tripping over a basket of eels. They writhe like wet noodles, ready for someone's dinner war, possibly escape attempt. The fishmonger chuckles at your expression. Fresh caught this morning, says. You don't doubt it, considering one just slapped your ankle. Joke number 1. Congratulations. You've been baptized in ill juice medieval perfume for the truly. It's unfortunate. The market is more than trades theater. Every stall owner is part performer, part gossip. You overhear two butchers debating whether the new taxes mean smaller portions for the poor. A baker interrupts to complain about the cost of flour. Someone mentions that the Lord's daughter was seen talking to a stable boy. Okay. And suddenly, the conversation detours into scandalous territory. You realize that in a time before TikTok, this was the trending feed. In the center of the square stands a raised platform where a town crier reads the latest decrees. His voice rings out, announcing the arrival of a noble caravan and a new curfew hours. People murmur. News travels slower than gossip, but hits harder when it's official. He finishes by warning about counterfeit coins, a reminder that not every silver penny is what it seems. Coin clipping, shaving the edges of silver coins for profit, was a genuine medieval crime, punishable by death. You quietly slide your hands into your pockets, pretending not to be suspiciously foreign. You notice a small crowd gathered around a man playing a stringed instrument. His tune is rough but joyful, and a few people toss coins his way. You Smile Street performers are timeless. He shifts seamlessly into a bawdy ballad about a monk and a goat, which earns laughter and a few scandalized gasps. Humor hasn't changed much. It's still a bit weird and a lot human. Joke number 2. Somewhere, a medieval Karen is already asking to speak to his abbot. You spot children running between stalls, giggling as they toss pebbles into an open barrel. One misses and hits a guard's boot. The guard turns slowly, raising an eyebrow. The square hushes for a moment. Then he grins, flicks the pebble back, and the tension melts. Even soldiers need levity here. You start to see how the city functions. Chaos wrapped in familiarity. Everyone knows everyone else's business, and that shared awareness keeps the whole system barely dashed together. But beneath the laughter and bartering, you sense unease. A beggar limps through the crowd, his hand outstretched. People look away. Poverty isn't just visible here, it's normal. Historians still argue whether medieval charity was motivated by genuine compassion or fear of divine punishment. Whatever the reason, you drop your stale carrot into his bowl. He nods once, grateful. You've just made your first charitable donation in the 14th century. You approach a stall selling spices, tiny miracles in sacks. The merchant lets you sniff cinnamon, pepper, and something earthy called galangal. These spices are worth their weight in silver. Wars have been fought over them. You realize that medieval people weren't flavorless eaters. They just had expensive taste. A fact for your trivia bank. Pepper was once used as currency, a peppercorn rent symbolizing payment in kind. Imagine paying rent and seasoning. Your landlord would love that until dinner ran out. A nearby woman sells candles and soap, though soap might be generous. It's a gray lump that smells faintly of goat. She swears it softens skin. You buy a piece, mostly because the concept of soap feels like hope. As you hand over a coin, she leans in. Watch for thieves, she whispers. Market day brings more than shoppers. You nod, suddenly clutching your pouch tighter. She's right. You feel a gentle bump at your side. A kid, maybe 12, pretending to trip. His hand brushes your belt, but you catch him mid-act. He freezes, eyes wide. You let him go. Deciding mercy feels more modern than justice here. Joke number 3. Congratulations. You've just survived your first medieval pickpocket attempt. Achievement unlocked. Not today, thief. The day stretches toward noon. The sun beats down and the market heat thickens. You buy a drink from a vendor selling ale because the water isn't safe and alcohol kills at least some bacteria. The ale is warm, cloudy, and surprisingly sour, but it's safer than the well water. You sip slowly, watching the swirl of humanity move around you. Every shout, every deal, every laugh feels like a heartbeat. This isn't just commerce, it's survival with flair. You realize something profound. Medieval people weren't primitive caricatures. They were hustlers, inventors, gossipers, survivors. They lived at full volume because silence here meant hunger. And as you stand there, half drunk on barley ale and sensory overload, you understand why your modern self wouldn't last a day nut for lack of toughness. But because this world demands a rhythm your bones haven't learned. Your stomach grumbles again. Time to find real food, whatever counts as edible next. You glance toward a narrow street leading out of the market, where smoke curls lazily from chimneys. Maybe there's a cook shop there. Maybe something hot and vaguely identifiable. Maybe, finally, a bite that won't fight back. You follow the smell, not yet realizing that in medieval kitchens, mystery meat is the house specialty. The street tightens around you, shrinking from open square to cramped lane. The noise fades to the low hum of clinking buckets and murmured complaints. Ahead, a row of crooked houses leans toward each other like gossiping old friends, their upper stories nearly touching. You duck instinctively, partly because the beams hang low, partly because something suspicious just dripped from above. You're looking for water, but in medieval times, that's like looking for clean Wi-Fi in a cave. A woman fills a pail from a wooden trough connected to a communal pump. The water sloshes grayish, catching light in unsettling ways. You watch her carry it off toward home, splashing a trail that smells faintly of life, and not the good kind. A man with a shovel waves you away from the edge of the lane. He's clearing out a drainage channel, basically an open gutter running through the street. Mind your feet, he warns cheerfully. Don't want to lose a boot in the muck. Look down. The gutter carries a slow trickle of wastewater, mixed with straw, mud, and things your modern brain politely refuses to categorize. Joke number 1. Congratulations. You've just met Europe's earliest form of indoor plumbing set. It's entirely outdoors and depressingly communal. Water here isn't a simple thing. Wells and pumps are lifelines, but there are also liabilities. You wander toward a public well near the square. People queue with wooden buckets, chatting in low tones. A child leans too far over the edge, and his mother yanks him back with a scold. Death by well accident was a genuine hazard. In fact, there are records of city ordinances demanding lids on wells because curious children and the occasional unlucky goat had a habit of falling in. Historians still argue whether contaminated wells or rats were the bigger driver of plague outbreaks. But you'd rather not test either theory. You scoop a little water to your lips. It tastes earthy, faintly metallic. You tell yourself that's minerals. The truth is, waste from tanneries, butchers, and even cemeteries often seeped into the water supply. You cough quietly, trying to ignore the knowing smirk of an old woman beside you. She mutters, "Best to boil it, stranger." You nod, realizing boiling means you'll need fire, and fire means smoke, and smoke means breathing more of what the city exhaled as you walk. You spot men emptying chamber pots into barrels, part of the city's so-called sanitation system. These night soil collectors earn a grim living hauling waste outside the walls to dump on farmland. It's efficient recycling, in a way. Crops grow, people eat, and the cycle repeats. Joke number 2. Medieval sustainability powered entirely by your bowels. The smell intensifies near the tanner's quarter. Here, leather is life and death by odor. Workers kneel by vats of liquid the color of nightmares, soaking hides in a mix of water, lime, and, yes, animal dung. A young apprentice waves at you with a stained hand. "First day," he jokes. You shake your head. "You'll get used to it," he adds, grinning. You're pretty sure you won't. A quick historical note. Tanning was vital for making everything from shoes to armor, but the process was so foul that tanners often lived on the city's edge, downwind of everyone else. Some records even describe laws forbidding them from washing hides in public streams. Historians still argue whether those bans were for health or just basic mercy. You escape the stench by turning down another lane, where women scrub clothes beside wooden tubs. They gossip between beats, slapping garments against boards, wringing them out with forearms that look carved from stone. You watch a moment, realizing laundry here is both exercise and social event. One woman spots you staring. "You can help," she says dryly, handing you a wet tunic. You try, awkwardly, splashing water everywhere. She laughs. "No husband will want you after that." You grin, weakly, appreciating medieval humor sharp as their knives. Nearby, a boy fills jugs from a small spring that supposedly feeds the local monastery. He boasts it's holy water, though the color suggests otherwise. Still, faith is a powerful filter. People here believe purity is spiritual before it's physical. Clean water is a blessing. Cleanliness itself, optional. That belief will come back to haunt you later. You rest on a stone. Step as a group of workers trudges past, carrying buckets toward the river. That's the city's main disposal route. Everything unwanted animal remains. Laundry, water, brewery, waste ends up downstream. Ironically, so does your drinking water if you live farther along. Joke number 3. Medieval environmental policy can be summed up as somebody else's problem, preferably downstream. As you follow the flow toward the riverbank, you notice how alive it all feels, despite the filth. Ducks paddle through foam, children toss sticks, and washerwomen sing hymns that echo off the stone bridge. Life persists through stink and sickness. You think about how fragile modern comfort is, a filter breaking, a pump filling in, how people here just adapt. Their noses adjust. Their lungs strengthen. You, on the other hand, are still coughing up the concept of unsanitized. A fisherman hauls in a net heavy with carp. He guts them right there, tossing innards back into the current. You try not to stare, but he catches your eye. "They'll feed the next catch," he says proudly. Circle of life. Circle of contamination. He offers you one, raw and glistening. You decline politely, claiming you're not hungry. He shrugs and takes a bite himself. Maybe he'll live. Maybe not. Food safety standards are still a few centuries away. You wander upriver, where the water clears slightly. A group of monks tends a small herb garden along the bank. One nods to you. "The Lord's water heals," he says. You glance at the river again, where a floating shoe bobs past. You smile weakly. Sure it does. You pause to rest under the bridge's shadow, watching light flicker through the ripples. The scene is oddly peaceful, if you ignore the smell. It's a strange paradox. The world here is beautiful from afar, but brutal up close. The river glitters like silver. till you remember it's carrying yesterday's dinner leftovers. A memory from earlier flickers back to Baker. The market, the well, everything in this city loops back into itself. Nothing wasted, nothing truly clean. It's like living inside a stomach one endlessly, it's digesting its own existence. You spot a small shrine built into the bridge wall, candles flickering beside a wooden carving of a saint. People pause to toss coins into a bowl of rainwater, murmuring prayers for health. You wonder how many of them have lost family to illness carried by this very river. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood disease transmission, but evidence shows they noticed patterns. Sickness followed filth. They just lacked the microscopes to prove it. You reach into your pocket and drop a coin in the bowl, half out of superstition, half out of sympathy. Maybe faith really was the best filter they had. The sun dips lower, shadows stretching. Workers head home, balancing sloshing buckets that glimmer with sunset light. A breeze carries the faint scent of wet hay, cleaner than anything else you breathed all day. You follow it, hoping it leads to Fudor, at least away from the next open drain. But as you walk, you realize something profound. In a world where water is suspect and waste is everywhere, survival depends on what you can tolerate. And right now, your tolerance has limits. You need a meal. But before that, you need to find somewhere where you can safely wash your hands. Spoiler, that's going to be harder than finding gold. You follow the faint trail of wood smoke curling from crooked chimneys, your stomach leading the way like a determined compass. The smell of cooking is both comforting and mildly terrifying, something between roasted meat and scorched mystery. It's midday now. Every street seems to hum with the same rhythm. It's hunger. You round a corner and find a cook shop wedged between a smithy and a cooper's workshop. A hand-painted sign swings above the door, depicting something that could be a goose or a dragon with gout. Either way, it promises food. The heat from the open hearth inside spills into the street, drawing you closer. Inside, the air is thick with smoke and chatter. A woman behind the counter wipes her hands on an apron, already beyond saving. She eyes you up and down. "Traveling, are you?" she asks, accent thick as the stew bubbling behind her. You nod. She gestures to a bench. "Sit then. We've got pottage and bread. Or just bread if you're short on coin." You take a seat beside two laborers, gnawing on what looks like bone soup. The table's surface is sticky, the kind of sticky that tells centuries of stories. The cook slaps a bowl in front of you, a grayish stew. It's thick with barley, turnips, and something unidentifiable floating near the top. You stir it gently, trying to decide if it's supposed to move on its own. Fun fact, pottage was the medieval staple dish, a slow-boiled mix of grains and vegetables that could simmer for days, sometimes with meat scraps added when available. Every home had a pot that rarely cooled, meaning yesterday's dinner literally became part of. Today's historians still argue whether this constant cooking kept disease at bay or just built stronger immune systems. Through sheer microbial exposure, you break a chunk of bread. It's dense, tough, and makes you grateful for dentistry advancements. Still, it fills you up, and that's what matters. You chew slowly, watching the cook ladle stew into bowls with practiced efficiency. She hums under her breath, a tune lost to time. A man at the far end of the table coughs violently, spattering crumbs. No one flinches. In a world without hand sanitizer, collective immunity is the only comfort. He wipes his mouth, mutters a prayer, and keeps eating. You slide your bowl a few inches away, just in case. Joke number 1. Congratulations, you've officially survived a medieval restaurant inspection. 1 out of 1 cooks agree. Your standards are too high. As the meal settles, you glance toward the hearth. A boy turns a spit, roasting what looks like a chicken until you realize it has 4 legs. Maybe to birds, maybe not birds. The cook catches your stare and grins. Bit-o rabbit, bit-o whatever the cat didn't chase off, she says. Adds flavor. You nod politely, swallowing hard. She wipes sweat from her brow with her sleeve. Fire's been going since dawn, she adds. Can't let it die, or I'll have to borrow a coal from the neighbor. You recall a fact. Medieval homes often shared communal ovens or fire sources, and a house without flame risked going cold and hungry. Carrying live coals between houses was common, though occasionally disastrous when someone tripped. Joke number 2. The medieval version of borrowing a cup of sugar could burn down your street. You finish your meal just as a burly man enters, carrying a sack over his shoulder. Meat delivery, he announces. The cook opens the sack. You lean forward, curious and immediately regret it. Inside are skinned hairs, a few birds, and something you can't identify, but that definitely used to breathe. She sorts through, briskly humming. Nothing goes to waste here, not even the parts modern people won't name aloud. She tosses a handful of herbs into the pot, parsley, sage, maybe mint. Spices are precious, but herbs grow freely. You breathe in the scent and almost forget the smell of the tanner's quarter. Almost. The woman next to you leans close, whispering, you shouldn't eat too late in the day. Makes the humors restless. You blink. Right. The 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to medieval medicine, your health depends on keeping them balanced. Too much heat, and you risk fever. Too much cold, melancholy. You nod wisely, pretending you knew that. She smiles approvingly. You've got a healthy look, she says. Not much black bile about you. You thank her, uncertain whether that's a compliment or a prognosis. Outside, the noise of the street drifts in hoofbeats, vendors, the clang of metal. The cook shop feels like a small refuge, even with its questionable hygiene. The warmth is hypnotic, the smoke curling upward like lazy thoughts. You imagine this is what comfort felt like before indoor heating a room full of strangers sharing stew, body heat, and bacteria. A small cat hops onto the bench beside you, eyeing your crust. You break off a piece and offer it. It sniffs, then sneezes. Maybe it knows better. Cats here are semi-respected useful for catching rats, though sometimes accused of witchcraft if too clever. Historians still argue whether medieval society loved or feared cats more. But you decide to err on the side of caution and scratch it gently behind the ears. The cook announces, closing soon for the afternoon. Workers rise, leaving coins or bits of barter on the table. A button, a nail, half a loaf. Currency is flexible when everyone's broke. You place your coin down, feeling the weight of its worth. For the poor, a meal like this could equal half a day's wage. You realize eating isn't just nourishment, it's an act of privilege. As you step back into the street, the brightness stings your eyes. Smoke rises from countless chimneys, and the air buzzes with life again. A baker nearby tends a communal oven, pulling out loaves scorched on one side and raw on the other. He fans them proudly. Best batch yet, he declares. You decide not to argue. A young boy runs past, carrying a wooden tray stacked with pies. You catch a whiff sweet, maybe apple. He offers one for a penny. You hand him a coin, take a bite, and instantly regret it. The filling is more onion than fruit, more mystery than flavor. You chew bravely. Joke number 3. Your first medieval dessert tastes like disappointment with a crust. You wander on, wiping crumbs from your chin, half full and half weary. Every doorway hides a cookshop, a tavern, or a family kitchen, fueled by the same smoky heart, fire, patience, and necessity. Meals aren't recipes, they're survival strategies. You pass a narrow alley where women hang pots outside to cool. One calls to another about the price of salt. Salt, you recall, was crucial not just for seasoning, but for preserving. Without refrigeration, everything was salted, smoked, or dried. Some cities even taxed salt heavily, sparking riots. Historians still argue whether the salt wars of certain regions were about economics or sheer culinary desperation. You watch as a man stirs a pot suspended over coals, muttering a prayer to keep it from boiling over. You wonder if anyone here ever just eats cold cereal. Then again, milk would probably kill you. The scent of roasted onions lingers in the air as the city's afternoon bell tolls. Your stomach is stable for now, but your mind buzzes with the realization that food here isn't merely sustenance, it's gamble and ritual in one. Every bite is a small act of trust in a world that barely trusts its own wells. And as the sun dips low and the cookshops close, you realize your next challenge will be finding a place to wash. Spoiler: cleanliness is not a medieval hobby. You step away from the fading warmth of the cookshop and into a world that smells like its own history lesson: smoke, sweat, and something faintly reminiscent of wet dog left in the rain. The afternoon light catches on puddles that don't deserve that word. Your stomach is full, your curiosity alive, and your next mission, unfortunately, involves hygiene. Let's get one thing clear. Clean in medieval terms means not visibly muddy. You could roll through a pigsty, dust off your tunic, and still be described as presentable. But you're a 21st century human armed with soap, shampoo, and anxiety about invisible germs. So this era's standards are about to make your brain itch. You pass a row of cottages where laundry hangs from windows like surrender flags. A woman leans out, shaking a rug onto the street directly onto you. A cloud of dust and something floral or fungal hits your face. She waves cheerfully. "Freshened it this morning," she says. You cough and wave back. Joke number one. Medieval spring cleaning mostly involves moving dirt from one place to another. You start by looking for a bathhouse. Public bathing still exists in some cities, inherited from Roman customs. Eventually, though, suspicion and sin start dripping into the mix because pleasure and cleanliness often came bundled together. The church has mixed feelings about that. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were shut down for spreading disease or for spreading occasional scandal. After a few wrong turns, you find one, a timber building with steam leaking from its roof and a painted sign of a wooden tub. You push open the door, half hoping, half dreading. Inside, the air is heavy with heat and herbs. A thin man greets you with a grin missing several teeth. A wash, a soak, or the full scrub, he asks. You choose just a wash, because the full scrub probably involves surprises. He gestures to a corner where a barrel of warm water waits. A woman dips rags into it, wringing them out over a smaller basin. The water has been reused so many times it qualifies as soup. Still, compared to the streets, it's paradise. You roll up your sleeves and splash your face. Steam rises, bringing out scents of rosemary, thyme, and faint regret. A real historical fact. Herbs like lavender and mint were commonly added to bath water not for luxury, but for their believed healing and purifying powers. Medieval people thought pleasant smells literally warded off disease, a theory called miasma. You decide not to mention bacteria. No one's ready for that revelation yet. You sit on a bench, soaking your hands. The attendant hands you a lump of soap gray, rough and smelling of goat. You recognize it as the cousin of the one you bought earlier. It lathers reluctantly, as if protesting modern expectations. Still, it works, scraping away a day's worth of grime. A man beside you hums while washing his hair, his beard full of bubbles. "Traveling?" he asks. You nod. "Keep your coins hidden," he advises. "Soap's dear these days. People will cut your purse for a sliver." You laugh nervously, unsure if he's joking. Joke number two. You never thought you'd live in a world where soap counts as high-value contraband. The bathhouse is social people chat, trade, gossip, even negotiate deals. It's like a medieval cafe with more nudity and fewer croissants. A pair of merchants argue about whether bathing weakens the body by opening the pores too much. A monk sitting nearby mutters a prayer, clearly trying not to listen. Historians still argue whether routine bathing was common or rare. Evidence suggests it depended on class, climate, and courage. You glance around, there's laughter, steam, and the slap of towels. It feels almost civilized till the attendant pulls the plug on the main tub and the water drains into a gutter that runs straight into the street. You sigh. Hygiene meet irony. You leave feeling cleaner, but not safer. The breeze outside is cool, carrying the temps of wood smoke. You notice a barber's pole spinning lazily in the next liné-redanned white spiral that makes you pause. You know what's coming. Barbers here do more than trim beards. They also perform minor surgery. Shaving and bloodletting share the same shop. You file that knowledge under things not to try. You pass a group of children picking lice from each other's hair, chatting like it's a casual game. One proudly displays a prize caught between nails. You look away, shuddering. Fun tidbit. Medieval people referred to lice as body pearls. Toes. That's not metaphor. It's optimism. A woman combs her daughter's hair nearby using a fine bone comb. Best to keep the little beasts moving, she says to you, smiling. If they settle, they bite worse. You nod politely, suppressing the urge to scratch. Your clean hands already feel contaminated again. You remember a traveler's advice from earlier. Boil your water, pray before meals, and never trust a handshake. You're starting to see why walking on, you spot a perfumer's stall a rare find. The air there actually smells pleasant, thick with rose oil and musk. The merchant waves you over. Care to smell rich? He asks. You lean closer as he uncorks a bottle. The scent is sharp and floral. Imported from Damascus, he claims. A drop behind the ear, and no one will guess you've not bathed in weeks. You almost laugh, then realize he's serious. Perfume here isn't luxury. It's camouflage. You buy a small vial, partly for survival, partly for hope. Joke number 3. You've gone from soapless wanderer to scented disaster. Progress smells like roses and panic as afternoon fades. You notice people lighting candles in windows, signaling the end of workday chores. You pass a baker's apprentice carrying a bucket of ashes to dump outside the medieval version of trash collection. Ash was used in soap making and cleaning, mixed with fat and lye. You can't help but marvel. They had chemistry without knowing they had chemistry. A sudden clatter behind you. A man trips, spilling his own bucket of wastewater. It splashes over your boots. He apologizes profusely, but the damage is done. You stare down at your once clean feet. The cycle begins anew. The irony isn't lost on you. In a world obsessed with sin, dirt might be the most democratic experience. Everyone wears it eventually. You start to understand the quiet acceptance here. Maybe survival requires a little grime under the nails, a little resilience in the skin. As twilight settles, you spot a narrow canal glinting in torchlight. The reflection trembles with ripples, and for a fleeting moment, it almost looks beautiful. Then you see the floating straw and best not to name it. You decide to call it a night. Clean enough is good enough. After all, tomorrow might bring mud, blood, or worse sand. You'll need your strength. But before rest, one thought lingers. You're surviving, yes, but just barely. And you haven't even met medieval medicine yet. You wake the next morning to a sound somewhere between a scream and a cough, the kind of noise only a rooster could make when it regrets all its life choices. Your back aches from the straw mattress, and your first conscious thought is a prayer to the gods of ibuprofen, which, sadly, won't exist for another 700 years. The light filtering through the shutters is gray and weak. Your throat feels scratchy, your head heavy. Congratulations, you're about to learn what medical care means in the Middle Ages. Spoilers, more art than science, and the artist is probably holding a knife. You stumble outside, hoping for fresh air, but the street is already alive. A woman limps past, clutching her side. The old man sneezes like he's trying to banish demons, and a child coughs continuously beside a stray dog. You realize that illness isn't a rare event. Here it's background noise. Everyone's either sick, recovering, or pretending they're fine. You spot a painted sign with a red and white "Pull Another Barber Surgeon's Shop." Against your better judgment, curiosity drags you inside. The room is dim, smelling of iron, candle wax, and faint despair. On a wooden table rests an assortment of gleaming tools, razors, knives, a brass bowl, something that looks alarmingly like pliers. A man in a stained apron greets you. "You look pale," he says cheerfully. "Fancy a bleed." Clears the head. It does. Swallow. "I just have a sore throat," you reply. He nods knowingly. Starts there. Better let the bad blood out before it spreads. Fun historical fact. Bloodletting was considered the universal cure for nearly everything from fever to melancholy to hiccups. Doctors believed it balanced the humors by draining excess fluid. Historians still argue whether anyone truly benefited or just fainted gracefully. You politely decline. The barber shrugs and moves on to his next patient, a man seated in a chair, gripping the armrests. The barber ties a band around his arm, makes a quick slice, and catches the dark stream in a bowl. You feel dizzy just watching. Joke number 1. Congratulations, you've discovered the medieval equivalent of a wellness cleanse. With more commitment and fewer refunds, you slip outside, gulping air. The sound of a bell draws you toward a small apothecary nearby. Inside, shelves line the walls, stacked with jars labeled in Latin. The apothecary, the spectacled man who looks, perpetually unimpressed, nods as you enter. Looking for something specific, he asks. "My throat hurts," you say. He hums thoughtfully and begins mixing ingredients with the focus of a wizard brewing regret. "Honey," he murmurs, "a pinch of cinnamon, some vinegar, and for strength, a dash of powdered frog bone." He hands you a small vial. You stare. "It'll chase the sickness right out," he assures. You take a cautious sip. It burns like medieval mouthwash and tastes faintly of bad decisions. Still, the honey helps. Joke number 2. If it tastes this terrible, it has to be medicine while you recover. He shows you his pride, Enjoy a dried hedgehog, spines intact, sitting like a trophy on a shelf. For asthma, he explains solemnly, ground fine and mixed with wine. You nod, trying not to imagine how they discovered that particular cure. Fun tidbit in medieval herbal lore. Nearly every animal and plant had a supposed medicinal use, from snail slime for burns to powdered emeralds for poison. Historians still argue whether these remedies were superstition or proto-science. You thank him and leave, clutching your potion like a talisman. Outside, a group of women gathers around a man lying on the cobblestones. A priest kneels beside him, murmuring prayers. Someone whispers that he fell ill after eating spoiled meat. The crowd crosses themselves, murmuring God's will. You realize there's a fine line between medicine and miracle here. A little further on, you spot a wooden sign painted with a crossed symbol for a local healer. The hut smells faintly of herbs and smoke. Inside, a woman with streaks of gray in her hair is grinding something in a mortar. Sit, she says, without looking up. You obey. Let me guess, she says, eyeing you. City air got into your lungs. Happens to all strangers. You're breathing too shallow. She places a hand on your forehead, then nods. Not feverish yet. That's good. Her movements are calm, almost motherly. She mixes a new batch of herbs, plantain leaves, chamomile, and a bit of honey. Drink this twice a day. No frogs this time. You sip the brew. It's bitter but gentle, like tea from a forest floor. You'll be fine, she says. Just don't go near the tanner's quarter again. That air kills quicker than sin. Q smiled faintly. She's not wrong. As she prepared to leave, she adds softly, and pray. God heals what herbs can't. It's not superstition, it's hope wrapped in ritual. Stepping back into the street, you feel a mix of gratitude and dread. The healer's hut fades behind you, replaced by a distant commotion. You follow the sound until you reach the marketplace again, where a small crowd circles a makeshift stage. A man in bright clothes stands atop it, waving a vial. Elixir of eternal youth, he shouts. Restores vigor, cures blindness, repels curses. He's a quack, of course, but he's also entertainment. People laugh, cheer, and toss him coins. His showmanship is as strong as his sales pitch. He opens a bottle, takes a dramatic sip, and flexes his arms. See? Alive and well, he cries. The crowd applauds. You almost admire the confidence. Joke number 3. In the Middle Ages, influencer marketing involved actual bloodletting and a higher mortality rate. As the day drags on, you notice how illness shapes everything here. The air hums with coughs, limps, and whispered prayers. Fear is constant, but so is resilience. People fall ill, recover, work again. Death hovers like a background hum, acknowledged but rarely discussed. A bell tolls from the church 3 slow peals. Someone in the parish has died. Heads bow briefly, then life continues. You're struck by the quiet acceptance of it all. In your world, death is sanitized, hidden away. Here, it's a neighbor, sometimes even a guest. You pause at a well to sip water, hesitating before you do. The healer's warning echoes in your mind. You pass instead, choosing thirst over risk. Above, gulls wheel in the sky. Their cries, sharp and distant. Night creeps in early, bringing chill and shadows. Torches flicker along the streets, their smoke curling upward like prayers made visible. You wrap your cloak tighter and head toward the inn, body aching from the day's chaos, lying down on the straw bed again. You stare at the low ceiling, thinking of the healer's words. Breathe deep, you do. The air tastes of smoke and earth and humanity all tangled together. Somewhere in the distance, another church bell tolls. Maybe for someone you passed earlier, maybe for you eventually. And as your eyes drift closed, you realize you've just lived through your first medieval illness and survived without being bled. That's practically a miracle. Morning light filters through the cracks in the shutters, golden and forgiving, as if it's decided to give you a second chance at this medieval life. The soreness in your throat has faded a bit. Thank the healer and not the frog bone potion, and you manage to stretch without wincing. You're beginning to think survival might actually be possible. Then you hear the bell again. Not a church bell this time, but a heavy iron clang from somewhere deeper in the city. It tolls steadily, signaling the start of the workday. And just like that, you're reminded that being healthy is only half the battle now. You have to earn your way through the day, out in the streets. Life is already in motion. You watch men rolling barrels toward the docks, women hauling baskets of bread to market, and apprentices jogging behind their masters, trying not to drop anything that would cost them dinner. There's a rhythm to it, all chaotic, loud, but strangely purposeful. You pass a blacksmith's forge first. Sparks leap like fireflies every time his hammer strikes. The heat pushes you back, a dry wall of air that smells of iron and sweat. The blacksmith himself looks carved from stone, his muscles shifting beneath layers of soot. He grunts at you, then at his apprentice, who's clearly regretting every career choice that led him here. A quick fact, the medieval workday could stretch 12 to 14 hours, sunrise to sunset, depending on the season. Guilds to professional organizations of the time set strict rules for how long, how hard, and even how someone could work. Historians still argue whether guilds were protectors of fairness or just medieval monopolies with nicer banners. You wander closer, watching the apprentice fumble with tongs. The master snaps, "Not like that, boy. You'll ruin the temper." The apprentice mutters an apology, eyes downcast. One mistake could cost him months of wages or a solid whack from the flat of a hammer. Joke number 1. Medieval job reviews were mostly verbal, occasionally concussive. Across the street, a group of weavers sit near open windows, their looms creaking like tired bones. The clatter is rhythmic, hypnotic even. A woman catches you watching and calls out, "Need a tunic, traveler?" Or just admiring my patience. You grin and shake your head. She smiles knowingly. Guild work meant community, but also control. You couldn't just decide to start a craft. You had to apprentice for years, then prove your worth before becoming a journeyman. And only after that, if luck smiled, could you be a master. It's like climbing a ladder, where every rung costs half your lifetime. You pass a group of carpenters building scaffolding. Their leader, a broad man with sawdust in his beard, pauses to sip from a leather flask. He eyes you. "You got trade?" he asks. You hesitate. "Traveler." He smirks. "Unemployed." The men laugh good-naturedly. You smile weakly and move on. Joke number 2. In any century, job hunting still makes you question your self-worth. You pause near a baker's workshop next. The smell hits you first east, ash and something heavenly. Inside, it's chaos. Flour clouds the air, dough slaps on tables, and someone's yelling about burnt crusts. The baker himself, a man with 4 arms like rolling pins, moves between ovens with supernatural focus. Fresh loaves by noon. He bellows. If they're not golden, they're garbage. His apprentices nod like soldiers at war. You notice one sneaking a pinch of dough when the master isn't looking. You make eye contact. He winks. The baker glances your way. You, traveler. You look like you've got strong arms. Care to earn your breakfast? You hesitate. Then again, this could be the immersive experience no one asked for. You roll up your sleeves. Within minutes, you're helping knead dough that feels like it's alive. Your hands ache, your shoulders burn, and flour coats everything you own. You realize modern gyms would call this functional training. The oven's heat turns your face pink. Still, there's a sense of satisfaction when the first loaves emerge golden, cracked, smelling like salvation. You even get paid. 1/2 loaf, slightly overbaked, but still warm. It's the best tasting paycheck you've ever received. While you eat outside, a town crier marches past, ringing a bell. Hear thee, he shouts. Guild meeting this eve. Bakers accused of short-weight loaves penalties to be discussed. The nearby baker groans. Always some fool cutting corners, he mutters. You realize honesty in trade wasn't just moral lit, was mandatory. A corrupt baker could be fined, flogged, or worse, publicly shamed by having his bread nailed to his door. You followed the crier to the town square later, curious. By dusk, the place fills with workers from every craft. Smiths, masons, tailors, even fishmongers. Guild leaders sit at a long table, candles flickering before them. The accused stand trembling. The air smells of sweat and anticipation. One man pleads, "The flour was poor. I swear the scales were true." The guildmaster leans forward. Poor flour or poor judgment, it makes no difference. The people trust us. He slams a mallet on the table. Fine him a week's wage. The crowd murmurs approval. Justice is swift, public, and oddly satisfying. A historian might say, this was the heart of medieval civic lifeware work. Community and reputation were all tangled together. If you were good, the guild lifted you. If you failed, it crushed you. And yet, despite the pressure, there is a strange pride in it. Everyone knows their place, their craft, their role in the great, climbing machine. As the meeting ends, torches flare in the square. People linger, laughing, gossiping, sharing bits of bread and ale. A minstrel strums a lute nearby, singing about a smith who fell in love with a tailor's daughter and forged his heart to her sleeve. It's corny and perfect. You lean against a wall, tired but content. Today, you worked, sweated, and somehow belonged if only briefly. Then, as you watch the flames dance in the square, you overhear a young apprentice muttering, "If I just save enough, maybe I can leave this town, be a master somewhere new." His friend snorts, "And start over. You'd need 10 years of dues first." They both laugh, but there's a flicker of longing there, desire for freedom that feels very familiar. Joke number 3. Every generation dreams of quitting the system, only to invent a slightly different one as the torches burn low. The bell tolls again. Work is done. Tomorrow, the cycle begins. A noose, wet, rules, and bread. You push off the wall, stretching your aching arms. You've survived another day, even earned your dinner. But as you walk back through the quiet streets, one thought follows you like a whisper. For all its order and pride, this world runs on exhaustion. And your next lesson will show how faith not fairness holds it together. The morning bells aren't gentle this time. They're heavy, insistent, echoing through the narrow streets like a summons you can't ignore. You wake to find the city already moving in a strangely synchronized rhythm, people crossing themselves as they pass church doors. Mothers whispering prayers over children before breakfast. Merchants pausing mid-setup to murmur blessings under their breath. You've entered a new dimension of medieval life. Faith as routine, religion as the heartbeat of the day. You stretch, step outside, and instantly notice how the world seems ruled by the sound of those bells. They dictate everything. When to work, when to pray, when to stop. It's less about belief and more about survival. Knowing them makes you stand out. Standing out here is rarely a good idea. A friar walks past barefoot, robes dusted with road grime. He greets people with a warm pox vobiscum, and they bow their heads respectfully. You do the same, awkwardly, and he smiles faintly as if to say, "Nice try." Stranger, a fun historical fact to start the day. In the Middle Ages, monasteries and cathedrals didn't just serve as places of worship, they were timekeepers, schools, hospitals, and community centers. Monks wrote manuscripts, brewed ale, and recorded local weather patterns centuries before meteorologists had fancy maps. Historians still argue whether monasteries were havens of enlightenment or cozy strongholds of control. You follow the flow of people toward the main church square. The building looms ahead, impossibly tall, its stone walls catching the morning sun. Gargoyles leer down from above, half guardians, half rainspouts. A group of beggars sits at the steps, hands outstretched. Inside, incense thickens the air, making the sunlight that filters through the stained glass look almost tangible. The hum of prayers surrounds you. You're not sure what to do, but your instincts tell you to kneel, partly to blend in, partly because there's something magnetic about this place. The floor is cold stone. The priest's voice rises and falls in Latin, melodic and incomprehensible. You catch only fragments. Dominus, peccata, amen. Joke number 1. You've attended concerts with better acoustics, but fewer life or death implications. After the service, the congregation drifts outside, chatting about both holy matters and bread priceasel. Apparently, God and economics share the same conversational space. You overhear a woman saying the bishop's sermon was longer than Lent itself. Her friend shushes her quickly. Gossip about clergy can travel faster than plague rumors. Speaking of Lent, you soon discover that fasting isn't optional here. The church calendar governs what you eat and when you eat it. Meatless days, holy days, feast days. There's a rule for everything. You pass a fishmonger's stall, the smell of salted cod almost knocking you backward. "Friday's special," he shouts, "wholly approved and worm-free." You nod politely, deciding maybe hunger builds character. You follow a small procession through the streets of priests, carrying a relic. It's children scattering flower petals, the choir humming softly behind them. Someone hands you a candle. You hold it awkwardly, unsure whether to sing, pray, or pretend you're in a historical drama. The crowd moves slowly, reverently. It's equal parts faith and community theater, and you find yourself oddly moved despite not understanding half of it. Historians still argue whether medieval religion was driven by devotion or social pressure. Watching now, you realize it's probably both. Belief here isn't abstract. It's woven into meals, labor, and language. Even a sneeze earns a God bless you, because in a world of illness, its divine insurance feels like common sense. You wander toward a smaller chapel later, drawn by the quieter sound of chanting. Inside, a monk copies text by candlelight. His quill scratches softly across the parchment. He glances up, smiles faintly, then goes back to his work. On the table beside him, illuminated letters bloom in gold and crimson. For the glory of God, he murmurs, as if explaining himself. You ask, softly, do you ever tire of it? He looks up again, his expression unreadable. Of faith? No. Of ink? Sometimes. Then he adds, writing is prayer with the hand. You think about your own modern scribbles, emails, notes, texts, sand, feel a flicker of humility. Outside, near the monastery gate, a group of pilgrims rests. Their clothes are dusty, their faces tired, but hopeful. They've come from miles away, some barefoot, all carrying token shells, wooden crosses, bits of cloth to mark their journey. One woman tells you she's walking to Canterbury for a healing. Her son coughs beside her, frail but smiling. We'll make it, she says. You believe her, because in this world, faith replaces medicine when medicine fails. A friar offers you a sip from his flask herbal wine, spiced and sweet, to keep the humors in harmony, he explains, and the soul too, if we're lucky. Joke number 2. Apparently, medieval medicine and theology shared the same ingredients list as evening approaches. You hear confessions taking place near the church doors. People kneel before small lattice windows, voices hushed. One man emerges, looking relieved. Another, tearful. You hesitate, but decide to listen, not confess. The priest's voice is calm, patient, and utterly human. When the last penitent leaves, the priest notices you lingering. You're not from here, he says. You shake your head. Then learn this, he continues gently. In our world, faith is not a choice. It's the thread that keeps us from unraveling. You thank him and step back into the cooling air. The bells ring again, softer now, marking vespers, the evening prayer. Windows glow with candlelight, and the city's noise fades to murmurs. You pass a tavern where laughter spills out like light. Inside, men toast saints between gulps of ale. Someone raises a mug and shouts, to St. Arnold, patron of brewers. The crowd cheers. You grimace. Even beer had holy approval. A quick fact, St. Arnold of Soissons was indeed considered the patron saint of brewing because, according to legend, his beer saved villages from disease by replacing contaminated water. Historians still argue whether it was faith or fermentation that did the saving. The tavern's warmth pulls you in. You sit, sip ale, and listen to conversations blending superstition and devotion seamlessly. I prayed for rain, one farmer says, and it came 2 days later. His friend replies, you should have prayed for timing. Laughter follows. Joke number 3. Medieval miracles often came with fine print. When you finally step outside again, the stars are visible between chimney stacks. A soft wind carries the faint echo of another prayer service starting somewhere beyond the walls. You realize faith here isn't confined to church's its in every breath, every superstition, every God-willing uttered before bed, and as you walk toward the inn, passing flickering candles in windows, it dawns on you that faith isn't just survival, it's the glue holding this precarious world together. You might not share their certainty, but you can feel its gravity. You look up at the cathedral one last time before sleep. Its spire pierces the night sky like a promise, or maybe a warning. Either way, tomorrow will bring new sounds, new dangers, and a new lesson because, in this world, faith may soothe the soul, but justice has very sharp teeth. The morning begins not with bells this time, but with shouting. Harsh, angry voices echo through the narrow street beneath your window. You stumble to the shutters and peek outside. A small crowd has gathered traders, townsfolk, even a few monks standing on tiptoe to see what's happening. At the center stands a man bound by the wrists, his tunic torn and his face gray with fear. Two guards flank him, holding spears like punctuation marks to a sentence you don't want to read aloud. Someone mutters, "Caught stealing bread." Another adds, "Second time this month." The crowd hums with judgment, pity, and morbid curiosity in equal measure. You realize this is your first brush with medieval justice's system, both simple and terrifying. You slip outside, trying to blend in. The guards march their prisoner toward the town square, and the crowd follows like a tide. The man's wife trails behind, pleading with the captain. He only took scraps. The children, but her words are swallowed by the noise. You reach the square, already thick with people. The Polaria wooden frame, used to lock offenders by the neck and wrist, stands ready. Its surface is darkened by age and use. Someone nearby mutters, "Better this than the stocks." At least he can still stand. A strange comfort, you think. A crier unrolls a parchment and reads aloud the charges. His voice is loud, practiced, theatrical, for theft of food, property of Master Howden, the baker, on 2 occasions. The accused shall spend 2 days and nights confined in the pillory. His shame known to all. The crowd cheers not out of cruelty, but because justice, in their eyes, has been done. A moral universe needs its rituals. The baker himself watches from the edge, arms crossed, its expression unreadable. A quick historical fact. In medieval towns, punishment was often public spectacle. Courts met in open squares, and sentences were carried out immediately to remind everyone that order depended on visibility. Historians still argue whether such punishments deterred crime or simply satisfied the human appetite for drama. You flinch as the guards lift the heavy wooden frame and lock it around the man's neck. He winces, but doesn't cry out. A child nearby laughs nervously, then looks away. People begin tossing bits of old bread, mocking him with the very thing that doomed him. Joke number 1. You realize the medieval justice system might have invented public comments, guess, just with more bread and fewer emojis. The scene turns uglier as the hours drag on. The sun beats down, flies gather, and the crowd thins. Eventually, a woman you recognize the thief's wife returns quietly with a jug of water. She kneels beside him, whispering something you can't hear. A guard looks away, pretending not to notice. When she's gone, you exhale shakily. You thought surviving medieval food and medicine was hard. This is harder. Here, morality isn't flexiblets, carved in oak and enforced by hunger. You wandered toward the town hall later, still unsettled. Inside, the space hums with chatter. Clerks scribbling records, merchants filing complaints, guards delivering reports. It's bureaucracy in its most ancient form. A balding clerk eyes you suspiciously, but says nothing. A man wearing fine robes, local magistrate. You guess, sits at a raised table. 2 people kneel before him, arguing over a cow. Literally, one insists it's his by birthright, the other by trade. The magistrate listens, bored. Finally, he says, "We'll weigh the milk yield next market day. Whoever's cow gives more, keeps her." The disputants nod. Justice, medieval edition, practical, occasionally poetic, rarely fair. Outside, a friar catches up to you. "You saw the thief?" He asks quietly. You nod. "He confessed to me last night, said hunger drove him." The friar sighs. "Sin is easy when the stomach speaks louder than the soul." Then, almost to himself, "And yet we call this order." Historians still argue whether medieval justice was truly cruel or just brutally consistent. Laws varied wildly between regions, and mercy depended more on your connections than your innocence. If you had a guild behind you or a lord on your side, your punishment might be a fine. If not well stocks, exile, or worse. You wander to the outskirts of town, where gallows rise against the horizon like skeletal trees. They're empty today, but the sight chills you anyway. A farmer passing by nods toward them. Keeps people honest, he says simply. You're not sure if that's wisdom or fear speaking. Joke number 2. You're starting to think honesty in the middle. Ages was less about virtue and more about self-preservation. As you walk back toward the square, you pass a small crowd forming again, this time around a traveling juggler. He tosses knives with impossible grace, spinning danger into laughter. For a moment, the tension eases. People need distraction, even in a world ruled by punishment. You notice a beggar nearby, his leg wrapped in rags, watching the performance. When the juggler finishes, the beggar claps weakly. Then he coughs, and a guard steps forward, frowning. Move along, he orders. The beggar bows his head and limps away. No one protests. The line between order and cruelty here is razor thin. You realize justice isn't about fairness, it's about balance. It's about keeping chaos barely contained. Later, you find yourself sitting near the same church steps where you began your day. The bells toll again, this time marking evening prayers. The sound is solemn, echoing over the rooftops. It's washing away the noise of the crowd. A woman beside you murmurs, "Every strike of the bell is mercy." You nod, though you're not sure you agree. Mercy feels scarce in this place. Across the square, the pillory stands empty now. The thief's wife sits beside it, head bowed, holding her husband's freed hands. The punishment is over, but the shame lingers. People glance, whisper, move on. Life resets. You find yourself thinking about modern courtrooms, judges, lawyers, appeals, and realize how fragile that system really is. Strip away the paperwork, the decorum, and justice still looks like this. One human weighing another's worth. Joke number 3. If time travel ever becomes real, lawyers might finally get their medieval setting, no suits required. Just good lungs and a strong moral stomach. As night falls, you drift toward the tavern again, craving warmth and anonymity. Inside, the air buzzes with conversation. Someone's already telling the story of the day's punishment, exaggerating details for effect. He stole an entire cart of bread. The man claims sloshing ale. Another corrects him. No, just a loaf. But the crowd grew hungry for spectacle. Laughter follows. You sip your drink silently, realizing truth here bends to the needs of the moment. Justice may be swift, but rumor moves faster. Outside, the square is empty, except for a cat prowling beneath the pillory. The moonlight turns the wood silver. You stop, staring at it one last time before heading to bed. The world around you feels heavier now, faith. Work, punishment, all intertwined like chains. You're surviving, yes, but your understanding of survival keeps changing. And as you lie awake that night, you can't help wondering what danger waits once the lights go out. Because in a city like this, justice sleeps, but fear doesn't. Night falls fast in the medieval city. There's no gentle twilight glow, no hum of distant traffic or neon reflections to soften the dark. Only the slow extinguishing of candles and the low murmur of final prayers. You step into the street and instantly understand why everyone told you not to wander after curfew. The daylight bustle has vanished, replaced by long shadows that stretch like claws across the cobblestones. The air smells of smoke and damp wood. And somewhere, far off, a dog barks, then goes silent. You tug your cloak tighter. Every sound seems sharper in the dark, the creak of shutters, the drip of water from a roof tile, the quiet scuff of your own boots. You've survived the noise of day. Now you must face the silence of night. A distant clang draws your attention, a watchman striking metal against metal, signaling his presence. All's well, he calls, voice echoing through the narrow alleys. You find comfort in that call, though you suspect it's more ritual than reassurance. A real historical fact. Medieval night watchmen were rarely armed and often half asleep. Their job was to keep peace, catch drunks, and shout warnings of fire. Historians still argue whether they prevented crime or simply announced it politely. You walk slowly, eyes adjusting. A flicker of light reveals a tavern still open, its windows glowing like embers. Laughter leaks out, rough and tipsy. Inside, men hunch over mugs of ale, their faces half lit by a hearth. You consider stepping in, but remember your dwindling coins. Better to keep moving in. Keep your purse tied tight. You turn down a narrower lane, one you don't quite recognize. The paving stones here are uneven, slick with something you hope is just rainwater. The houses lean inward like gossiping neighbors, their upper stories almost touching. Somewhere above, a shutter slams, startling you. You quicken your pace. A shape moves in the shadows ahead, a man hunched beside a doorway. He looks up, eyes catching the faint moonlight. Spare a coin. He rasps. You hesitate. He's wrapped in rags, face pale. When you offer a small copper, he nods gratefully and whispers, "Don't go toward the docks." His voice trembles. "Bad folk out tonight." Joke number 1. It turns out bad neighborhood warnings have been around longer than Yelp reviews. You thank him and turn the other way, your footsteps echoing. Soon you reach a small square where a single torch burns on an iron post. Beneath it sits a watchman wrapped in a cloak, head drooping. His spear leans against a wall, forgotten. You clear your throat gently. He jerks awake. "Who goes there?" "Just walking." You say, "Walking?" He squints. "At this hour, you'll end up robbed, or worse. Go home." He gestures toward the dark street behind you, then sighs. "Unless you fancy the lockup, I'll escort you to your inn." You fall into step beside him. He walks with the weary gait of someone who's seen too much of the same trouble. "You'd think the night brings peace," he says softly. "But no, the thieves love it, and the drinkers never quit. The fire risk alone keeps me awake." You pass a side alley, and the stench makes you good rotting scraps, human waste, and the faint tang of smoke. He notices your grimace. "They toss their chamber pots after dusk," he explains. "Less complaint that way." He chuckles dryly. If you hear someone shout, "Gardy-loo," duck. Fun tidbit. Gardy-loo was the actual cry used in medieval towns before tossing waste out windows, derived from the French garde-l'eau, beware of the water. Historians still argue whether it was effective or just a polite formality before disaster. As you continue, the sound of muffled footsteps behind you makes both of you freeze. The watchman raises his torch. "Who's there?" Silence. Then a rustle, a scuffle, and a faint glint of movement. "Stay close," he mutters. The two of you edge forward. The alley ahead is narrow, barely wide enough for two. A rat darts across the path. Then a figure bolts from the shadows, bumping your shoulder hard before disappearing into the dark. You barely glimpse him, but the watchman curses. "Pickpocket." He runs a few steps, then stops, panting. "Not worth chasing," he says. They vanish like smoke. Looks you over. "Still got your purse?" You check miraculously. "Yes." "Lucky night," he mutters. Joke number 2. Congratulations. You've just survived medieval nightlife, original escape room, with fewer clues and more actual crime. He escorts you back toward the town square, where a few lanterns still burn. "Best stay near the church after dark," he advises. Holy ground scares the wicked, mostly. His tone suggests he's not fully convinced. As you part ways, you notice the faint glow of candles flickering in windows. Families inside whisper evening prayers, children already asleep beside smoky hearts. You feel a pang of envy, warmth, and safety Seems so rare here. You pass a row of shuttered shops, the baker's, a blacksmith's, a tailor's booth, all locked tight, barred from within. Above them, carved wooden signs creak in the wind, telling their stories silently. A small cat sits on a windowsill, watching you with bored suspicion. The moon slips behind clouds. The darkness deepens. You find yourself near the city wall, where the air feels colder. The faint hum of the river drifts up from below. A figure leans against the wall guard, or maybe not. You can't tell. His armor glints faintly. You're out late, he says. His tone is casual, but his hand rests on the hilt of a dagger. You nod slowly, heading back. Good. He smiles thinly, because some don't make it back, okay? His eyes glint. Then he turns and walks away. You're not sure if it was a warning or a threat. You move faster, heart pounding. The path back to the inn twists like a bad memory. You recognize the crooked sign of the tavern you passed earlier, the Sleeping Pig. Its light spills onto the street, a small oasis of life in all this darkness. You slip inside. The warmth hits you instantly, along with the smell of ale, sweat, and roasted meat. A bard strums softly in the corner, singing about a knight who fought shadows only to find they were his own. You sink into a bench, grateful for company even loud, drunken company. An older man at the next table leans over. You're not from around here, he says, squinting. You shake your head. He chuckles. You'll learn. Night belongs to no one. He tells you a local legend, a ghost that haunts the riverbank. It's the spirit of a woman who drowned, waiting for her husband's return. She cries at midnight, he says, but if you answer, she'll steal your voice. He grins, showing crooked teeth. You smile politely, pretending not to glance at the door every few seconds. Joke number 3. In a world without Netflix. Ghost stories were both bedtime entertainment and a firm argument for curfews. When the bard finishes his song, the tavern slowly empties. The owner douses the lamps one by one until only a few candles remained. You pay for a corner cat and stretch out, boots still on, 'cause trust feels like a luxury. Outside, the city exhales, quiet, restless, alive in its own dark rhythm. Somewhere, a dog howls. The watchman's call echoes faintly again. All's well. You close your eyes and almost believe him. Almost, because in this century, the night is not for dreaming, it's for surviving until dawn. Dawn drips into the city like watered down wine, slow, pale, and reluctant. You wake with a sore back from the tavern cat and a mouth dry as old parchment. The bard snores somewhere in the corner, a sound like distant bagpipes collapsing. You stretch, trying to ignore the smell of spilt ale that seems permanently baked into the walls. Outside, town is stirring again. Merchants pull open their shutters. Apprentices sweep yesterday's filth into the gutters. And carts creak as they roll toward the gates. You join the movement, drawn by curiosity, or maybe by the faint hope that somewhere beyond these walls, the air smells less like humanity. At the gatehouse, you pay a small toll, grumbling as the guard counts your coins twice before waving you through. Beyond lies the open road, stretching into a haze of morning mist. The fields glitter with dew. Birds chatter in the hedges. And for the first time in days, you feel like you can actually breathe. You decide to travel to the next village, maybe 2 leagues away. A friendly enough distance, you think? How hard can a medieval road really be? Cue joke number 1. If roads had Yelp ratings, this one would get 1 star for mud depth exceeding ankle tolerance. Within 10 minutes, your boots are heavy with muck. The so-called road is more of a suggestion to rutted paths carved by wagon wheels, punctuated by puddles deep enough to qualify as small ponds. A farmer passing with an ox cart laughs at your frustration. Gets worse after rain, he calls cheerfully, which is always. Still, you trudge on. The air smells fresh grass, earth, smoke from distant heart sand. For a while, You almost enjoy it. Then the wind shifts, carrying something less pleasant. The scent of manure, thick and sour. You glance at the farmer again. He shrugs. Fertilizer, medieval perfume. After a mile, the first cart breaks down ahead of you. A merchant curses under his breath as one wheel sinks into the mud. You offer to help, and together you heave, grunting and slipping until it finally pops free with a sucking sound. He thanks you, wipes his brow, and introduces himself as Rolf, headed to market. He asks, "Just traveling," you reply. "Then keep to the road," he warns. "Bandits took 2 men last week. Left their shoes, though too small," they said. He laughs. You don't. A real historical fact. Medieval highways were notoriously dangerous, even near cities. Banditry was rampant, especially after wars or bad harvests when soldiers and peasants alike turned to robbery. Historians still argue whether local lords quietly tolerated it for profit or simply lacked the manpower to stop it. The road curved through a stand of trees, their branches clawing overhead. Birds scatter as you pass, their cries echoing like tiny alarms. The ground softens again, and the mud hides the ruts. Your boot catches, and you nearly fall face first into a puddle that smells faintly of despair. By midday, your stomach growls. You find a small clearing where a few travelers rest around a smoky fire. One, a tinker with soot-streaked hands, waves you over. "Warm yourself," he says, passing you a scrap of bread that could double as construction material. You chew politely. It tastes like punishment, and he ends ahead. You ask between bites. "Half a day's walk," he says, "if you don't get robbed first." Then he smiles, which somehow makes the statement worse. You share stories for a while. He tells you of towns that hang pickpockets, but welcome gamblers, of nobles who charge tolls on bridges that no longer exist. He shows you a bag of trinket smears, spoons, a small tin whistle. Luxury goods, he calls them, with a wink, a quirky tidbit. Tinkers like him were the traveling repairmen of the medieval world, mending pots, sharpening blades, and spreading gossip between towns. Some historians still debate whether their wandering lives made them folk heroes or public nuisances. The sun climbs higher. You thank him and continue on, following the road as it narrows into a muddy ribbon between fields. Peasants work there, bent double, their hoes thudding rhythmically into the earth. One straightens up, wipes his brow, and waves. "You've missed the fair," he shouts. "All that walking for nothing." You wave back, pretending you know where you're going. As the afternoon deepens, clouds gather gray, swollen, unfriendly. The first drops fall just as you reach a wooden bridge spanning a sluggish river. The boards creak ominously. A sign nearby warns of a toll, though no one is present to collect it. You toss a pebble into the water below and watch the ripples vanish in the rain. Joke number 2. Medieval bridges came with 2 guarantees: rat and bureaucracy. You hurry across, stoked within minutes. The rain turns the road into soup. By the time you spot an inner-squat building with a crooked sign reading "The Swan and Sheaf," you're shivering dot inside. The warmth hits you like mercy. The innkeeper eyes your muddy state with mild despair. "Boots off by the door," she says, "and no dripping near the fire." You obey instantly. The common room smells of stew and damp wool. Travelers huddle over bowls, talking quietly. A group of merchants compare coinage, arguing about whose silver has been shaved thinner. They file the edges. One says, "It's fraud." A man beside you laughs. "Fraud? You should see what the king calls taxation." Real historical note. Coin clipping, filing precious metal from coins' edges was a common medieval scam. Punishments ranged from fines to mutilation. Historians still argue whether economic instability or greed drove its spread. You sip a cup of thin ale, grateful for its warmth. A troubadour strums a lute near the hearth, singing of a knight who lost his horse, his love, and his sense of direction all in the same week. The crowd chuckles knowingly. When the rain eases, you step outside to see a rainbow arcing faintly over the fields. The road stretches on, still muddy, but somehow less menacing. A couple of travelers saddled up their horses nearby. One gestures at you. Headed east. We can share the road. You join them, feeling oddly comforted by company. As you walk, they swap tales of travelers who disappeared between villages of haunted forest and cursed wells. You pretend to laugh, but your eyes keep scanning the tree line. Joke number 3. Medieval travel was basically an extreme sport marathon meets crime documentary. The sun dips low again, turning the puddles to molten gold. You're exhausted, filthy, and sore, but strangely proud. You survived the medieval road at least for now. As the inn fades into the distance, the countryside stretches open and wild, dotted with distant windmills and sheep like pale stones scattered over green hills. For a fleeting moment, the world feels almost peaceful. Then a crow lands on the signpost ahead, tilts its head, and caws. You take it as a reminder. Peace never lasts long here. The morning after your muddy trek greets you with frost edging the window of your tiny inn room. Your breath fogs the air as you sit up, blanket clutched around your shoulders. The warmth from last night's hearth has long vanished, and your joints feel stiff, like they've aged a century overnight. Welcome to medieval winterwear. Cold isn't a season, it's a personality test. You peer outside. The road you struggled along yesterday is now a pale ribbon of rime. Farmers are already out, shoulders hunched, trudging toward fields that looked half dead. You wonder what they're harvesting in this chill until you realize they aren't there, digging through the frost for whatever roots might have survived. The innkeeper knocks softly and brings you a bowl of thin gruel. Steam curls up, carrying the faint smell of oats and smoke. You're lucky, she says. We still have some grain left. Won't last if this weather keeps on. You blink. It's only October. She gives you a grim smile. Then pray it's not like the year of the Great Famine, historical fact to warm you right up. Between 1315 and 1317, relentless rain ruined crops across Europe, leading to mass starvation. Whole villages emptied. Historians still argue whether it was just climate or divine. Punishment people feared more. You force down the gruel, surprisingly comforting. Once you stop tasting it, 10 step outside. Your breath curls into the air, and every step crunches. You pass peasants huddled around small fires, their faces red from the cold. A child sneezes and wipes their nose on their sleeve, earning a weary look from their mother. The town's market is half empty. The few stalls that remain sell little more than onions, salted fish, and bundles of firewood. You spot a butcher's table, but its goods look gray and sad, more bone than meat. Winter fare, he explains with a shrug. You eat what you have. Joke number 1. You eat what you have could be the unofficial medieval cookbook title forward by desperation. You overhear talk of a poor harvest grain spoiled in the fields, cattle dying early, prices climbing like ivy on a crumbling wall. People barter instead of buying. One woman trades a bundle of wool for 2 loaves of bread and looks relieved at the exchange. You wander out toward the countryside, drawn by the quiet. Fields stretch to the horizon brown, cold, and stripped bare. In the distance, thin trails of smoke rise from cottages. You think of modern heating and thermostats and laugh softly. Here, warmth comes only from firewood, bodies, and prayer. A man chopping logs outside a cottage nods as you pass. You traveling far, trying to reach the next town. He pauses, leans on his axe. Stay near a hearth before sunset. The wolves get bold when the snow comes. You glance toward the woods. The trees stand black and silent, their shadows long. You're not sure if he's joking. By afternoon, snow begins to fall slow, lazy flakes drifting like ashes. The road disappears under a white film, and the landscape turns ghostly. You pull your cloak tighter and keep walking. Your boots crunch, your fingers ache, and your stomach growls. Ahead, a small chapel appears, smoke curling from its chimney. You push the heavy wooden door open and step inside. The air smells of incense and wet stone. A handful of villagers kneel before a statue of Mary, candles flickering at her feet. Their murmured prayers sound more like pleading than devotion. A friar turns towards you, smiling gently. Traveling in this weather, you're braver than you look, or dumber, you mutter. He chuckles softly and offers you a seat near the hearth. Rest, then. The snow will thicken soon, speaks of faith as though it's another kind of shelter. When the crops fail, he says, we fast and pray. When the winter lingers, we trust it will end. Then, quieter, sometimes it doesn't. He tells you of years when the cold came early and left late of rivers freezing so solid that merchants held markets atop them. You picture stalls on ice, laughter echoing through the frost, humanity refusing to surrender. A quirky tidbit in some parts of medieval Europe. Ice fairs really did take place on frozen rivers like the Thames, where people sold sweets, roasted meat, and warm ale atop the ice. Historians still debate whether it was courage or cabin fever that inspired them as night falls. The friar offers a spare cot in a corner of the chapel. You accept gratefully. The snow outside thickens, muffling every sound. The world shrinks to candlelight, prayer, and the slow crackle of the hearth. You wake at dawn to muffled voices. A small group of villagers has gathered around the friar. One man holds a bundle wrapped in cloth, too still to be anything but what you fear. The cold took him, the friar says softly, only 7 winters old. You look away, throat tight. The villagers murmur prayers, their breath white in the cold air. The friar adds more wood to the fire, though his warmth feels feeble now. When the burial is done, you step outside again. The world glitters so beautiful it hurts. The air is sharp enough to sting your lungs. You understand now that beauty here is always edged with danger. By midday, the snow eases. You continue down the road, following faint tracks left by a cart. The countryside looks endless, empty, and fragile. A flock of crows circles above, her cries echoing through the stillness. Joke number 2. If you thought chilling atmosphere was just a metaphor, medieval winter says, hold my frozen mead. You find shelter in a barn that evening, joining a family of travelers already huddled inside. They share a loaf of hard bread and a few slices of dried apple. The youngest child clutches a wooden toy horse, too tired to play. You offer them your cloak for the night, and the mother whispers, bless you. Outside, wind howls through the cracks, shaking the walls. Inside, people sleep close together for warmth, the air thick with quiet breaths. The horses snort softly, their bodies radiating a surprising comfort. Somewhere in the darkness, you hear distant howls, long, mournful, too real to be imagination. Someone stirs, but doesn't move. Everyone knows better than to step outside. You lie awake, thinking about the balance of this world, how survival depends not just on strength, but on luck and community. The smallest misstep of bad harvest, us. A frozen well can undo everything. Joke number 3. You start to suspect the medieval motto was adapt or be a popsicle as dawn breaks. Pale and trembling, you see the first blush of light on the snow. You've made it through the night again, but your bones ache from the cold, and your heart feels heavy from what you've seen. The family thanks you, and you part ways. The sun glints weakly over the horizon, painting the frost gold. For a brief, deceptive moment, the world looks gentle again, but you know better now. Every season here tests you. If you winter is just the most honest about it. You've made it through the cold barely, but survival in the medieval world isn't just about weathering the elements. It's about knowing your place. And here, place isn't just physical. It's social, carved into stone like the church walls that watch over every town. You step back into the thawing streets, and feel it instantly, that invisible tension humming through every conversation. Every glance, the morning market is back in motion. Carts rolling, chickens squawking, vendors shouting their prices. But now you notice the differences that were once invisible. The merchant's daughter struts in dyed wool, her shoes clean, her hair braided with ribbon. The miller's boy bows as she passes. Meanwhile, a laborer carrying sacks of grain keeps his eyes fixed on the ground. You realize class isn't just visibly choreographed. Everyone knows the steps but you. A baker calls you over, grinning. You look lost, traveler. Fresh bread. His stall smells divine caramel crusts and warm yeast. You reach for a coin, but he hesitates. Wait, he says. You're not part of a guild, are you? You blink. A guild. Of course. No one sells in the market without one. He gestures proudly to a small metal badge pinned to his tunica stylized loaf, stamped with a cross. The Baker's Guild, he explains. Keep standards high, prices fair, and outsiders out. He smiles again, but there's steel under it. A historical fact. Guilds were the backbone of medieval urban life, part trade union, part social club, part local government. They set prices, trained apprentices, and guarded secrets like family heirlooms. Historians still argue whether they empowered craftsmen or just protected. Monopolies. You ask what happens to those who aren't in one. He shrugs. They don't sell. Or they do, once, and never again. He glances toward a nearby cart where a woman peddles cheap pastries. Two guards approach her, and she quickly packs up, eyes downcast. You leave your coin anyway, take your loaf, and move on. The bread is good, warm, soft, alive with flavor, but you can't shake the image of her folding her wares away as you wander. The city's invisible ladders reveal themselves. The rich ride past on horses, cloaks lined with fur. Tradesmen shout greetings to equals, nod curtly to customers, and ignore beggars altogether. Nobles stroll through the market as though they own not just the goods, but the people who made them. Maybe they do. You find an open square where a small crowd gathers around a man in fine clothes, reading from a parchment. His voice carries easily. By order of His Grace, the Earl of Wintmere, he declares, all tenants owing back rent must pay in full before Michaelmas or forfeit their holdings. Groans ripple through the crowd. A woman clutches her husband's sleeve. But we've no coin, she whispers. The official rolls the parchment, unmoved. Then you'll find another lord who feeds you, he says flatly, mounting his horse. Joke number one. You start to think medieval lords invented the phrase tough luck centuries before customer service did. A farmer beside you spits into the mud. He'll get his rent, he mutters, and his soul wait for it later, but he doesn't raise his voice. No one does. You realize rebellion here isn't loud, it's whispered. Later, you find work stacking sacks of grain at the mill in exchange for a meal. The overseer, burly man with a beard like a snowdrift, watches closely. Don't spill a kernel, he warns. The Lord takes his share before the miller sees a crumb. You nod, sweat already soaking your shirt. When the work's done, you sit by the water wheel and eat your reward. A bowl of pottage, thick with barley and a few slivers of turnip. It tastes humble, but real. A girl sits beside you, dipping bread into her bowl. You're lucky, she says. Some days, there's no meal at all. You ask how she manages. We owe the miller, she says simply. He owes the Lord. The Lord owes no one, okay? Historians still debate whether the medieval social order truly kept peace or simply froze inequality in place. What's certain is that moving up was nearly impossible. Birth, trade, and favor, not talent determined everything. The girl tells you about her brother. Once apprenticed to a blacksmith until a noble borrowed him for estate work. He'll never come back, she says quietly, but the rent's paid. Later, as the sun drops, you pass a narrow alley where a noble's servant stands on a barrel, march shouting the day's decrees. Taxes, curfews, guild ducats, endless. The crowd listens wearily, some with resignation, others with smoldering resentment. A quirky tidbit, medieval peasants sometimes petitioned their lords with written pleas, complete with wax seals. A few even rhymed their complaints into verse, hoping poetry might soften the blow. Historians still argue whether any lord ever actually read them. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a procession. A wealthy merchant carried on a litter, perfumed and smug. His attendants shout for space, and you're shoved aside into a puddle. Your boot sinks, your pride bruises. He doesn't even glance your way. Joke number 2. You're beginning to think the medieval motto was mind the puddle. Oh, mind your place. You find an inn that night, bustling with traders. Gold glints on fingers. Silk gleams by the hearth. A man nearby boasts of his connections to the bishop. A good word from him, he says, and I'll have a seat on the council by winter. His companion laughs, and a new mistress by spring. You sit quietly in a corner, listening. Every story circles back to power. Who has it, who's borrowing it, and who's pretending to. The poor here don't just survive. They orbit those who can destroy them. When you finally sleep, you dream of ladders stretching into the clouds, some gilded, some splintered. You climb one, hands raw, only to find the rungs vanish beneath you. You fall into darkness, wake, sweating. Morning brings a fragile calm. The sun rises pale over the rooftops. You step outside, watching the townsfolk move like clockwork figures in a hierarchy that's centuries old. You realize this isn't oppression by accident. Tits, the only rhythm they know. Joke number 3. In modern terms, the medieval social network had 0 privacy settings and infinite judgment. You pass a beggar by the church gate, his hat outstretched. You drop your last coin in. May God repay you, he murmurs. You nod, thinking that repayment may take a few centuries as you walk on. You wonder if surviving medieval life means accepting that no one truly rises alone. You need a guild, a lord, a patron, or sheer luck. And luck here is in short supply. The bells toll again, calling the rich and poor alike to prayer. You pause to listen. The sound fills the air equal in volume, unequal in consequence, and you realize you might last a day here. Maybe 2, but only if you learn to bow before you speak. Morning mist curls over the fields as you leave the town behind. The air smells faintly of damp hay and wood smoke, but for once, there's a kind of peace in the rhythm of your footsteps. You survived the cold, the hunger, the lords, and the gossip. And yet, as you follow the winding dirt road, you realize the medieval world still holds one last card to play its mind. You're heading toward a monastery on a hill, a place people call a beacon of light in dark times. You laugh softly. After all you've seen, you could use some light. The path winds upward between tall hedges. Birds flit overhead, their wings like quick brushstrokes across the gray sky. At the crest of the hill, the monastery appears massive stone walls, a squat bell tower, a gate guarded by silence. You knock, and a monk opens it with a serene smile. "Welcome, traveler," he says. "You look tired." "It's accurate," you reply. He chuckles. "Then come. We share what we have." Aside, the world slows down. The courtyard smells of herbs and beeswax. Monks move silently, tending gardens, copying manuscripts, or carrying buckets of water. No shouting, no bargaining, no lords demanding coin, just quiet discipline. You feel your shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. A monk named Brother Thomas leads you to the refectory, where the meal is plain but filling. Vegetable stew, coarse bread, and a small cup of ale. "We live by simplicity," he says, "and by routine. 7 prayers a day, 7 reminders that life is more than toil." A historical fact for your mental scrapbook: monasteries were the medieval world's centers of learning. They preserved classical texts, kept medical knowledge alive, and taught reading and writing to a privileged few. Without them, much of what we know of ancient history might have simply vanished into dust after the meal. Brother Thomas takes you to the scriptorium, a long room where robed figures bend over parchment. The scratching of quills fills the air, steady as rain. Candles flicker over rows of ink pots and pigments. You lean closer to one page and see an intricate illustration, a dragon curling around gold letters. Beautiful, you whisper. Every letter, Thomas says softly, is an act of devotion. You watch the monk's hand move slowly, steadily. His ink stains his fingertips, but his eyes are calm. You wonder how long it takes to copy a single book. Months, he admits, as if reading your mind. Sometimes years. He dips his quill again. The world outside may burn, but we write. A quirky tidbit. Some monks used to doodle tiny caricatures or secret jokes in the margins of holy manuscripts, snails fighting knights, rabbits jousting with swords, or cheeky self-portraits in cowls. Historians still debate whether these were playful acts of rebellion or just boredom with divine commentary. Brother Thomas shows you the library next. It's cool and dim, filled with the scent of parchment and oil. You run your fingers over the spines, some in Latin, some in Greek, all priceless. Knowledge is the only treasure we can take beyond the grave, he says. You think about how few people outside these walls can even read. Do people ever resent that? You ask. He sighs. Some do, but the world needs order, just as fields need fences. You've heard that logic before from lords, from merchants, from priests. It sounds noble until you notice who's on which side of the fence. Historians still argue whether monasteries were havens of learning or fortresses of control, whether they preserved truth for everyone or only for those deemed worthy. As you wander the cloister, you overhear a group of younger monks debating quietly. If the sun moves around the earth, one insists, then why does it not scorch one side forever? The other frowns, because God wills the balance. You can't help but smile. Historians still argue about that one too, you murmur. When the evening bells toll, the monks gather in the chapel. Their chant rises, low and resonant, echoing through the stone. You sit at the back, letting the sound wash over you. It's hypnotic, both haunting and serene. For a brief moment, you feel something like peace. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's faith. Maybe they're the same thing here. After prayers, the abbot invites you to his chamber. He's older than time, his beard white as wool, his voice a soft rasp. You've traveled far, he says. What have you learned? You hesitate. That everyone's surviving, but no one's living. He nods slowly. That is wisdom most never find. We trade comfort for meaning, safety for truth. Few accept the cost. He studies you for a long moment. Would you stay? We can teach you to read, to write, to think beyond hunger. The offer stirs something in you, a yearning for stillness, for certainty. But you glance at the window, where dusk gathers like a secret. I don't belong behind walls, you say finally. He smiles faintly. No one truly does, but walls protect more than they can find. That night, you sleep in a small cell, a single candle flickering beside you. The stone floor is cold, but the silence feels sacred. You dream of ink spreading across parchment, words forming bridges between centuries. You wake before dawn to chanting, the rhythm steady and eternal. The monks file out to begin their prayers. You follow them into the courtyard, where the sky blushes with first light. Joke number 1. You never thought you'd miss medieval taverns, but chanting at 5 a.m. makes ale and gossip sound downright spiritual. After breakfast, Brother Thomas hands you a small scrap of parchment. For your journey, he says. It's a quote written in careful Latin, which he translates. The mind, once stretched by knowledge, never returns to its old size. You tuck it into your cloak pocket. The wind tugs at your hood as you leave the monastery behind. The path downhill gleams with dew, and the fields below look impossibly green. Joke number 2. You tell yourself that if enlightenment had a frequent traveler program, you'd at least earn a candle by now. As the sun rises higher, you hear distant church bells echoing from the valley. The sound feels less oppressive, now more like a reminder that the world is still turning, even if slowly. You pass a peasant hauling firewood and wave. He nods back, eyes tired but kind. You realize that while the monks preserve the words of history, people like him live it, and then, without warning, a thought slips in. Maybe you wouldn't last a day here, not because it's cruel, but because it's certain. Everything has its rule, its role. There's no room for the modern luxury of choice. Joke number 3. You smile, imagining your smartphone buzzing in this century. New notification. No Wi-Fi since 1347. You walk until the monastery fades behind the trees. The road curves east toward a faint shimmer on the horizon, a castle, maybe, or a town you've yet to discover. Your legs ache, your hands are stained with ink, and yet, somehow, your mind feels clearer. The medieval world hasn't just tested your endurance, it's tested your understanding of what it means to know that the wind shifts, carrying the scent of spring. For the first time, it feels like a promise. The wind carries the faint scent of wood smoke and wet earth as you descend from the monastery's hill. The road is soft with thawing mud, puddles glinting like mirrors. Your breath fogs faintly in the cool morning air, but there's something new beneath it, a sense of familiarity. The medieval world has stopped feeling like a strange museum exhibit and started feeling uncomfortably like home. You follow the road toward a sprawling castle in the distance, its towers stabbing through the clouds. The monks told you that travelers heading east often find work there. The idea of a roof, food, maybe even warmth is irresistible. So you walk. By midday, you reach the castle gates. A line of peasants stretches before you, men and women carrying baskets, sacks, tools, anything they can trade or offer for the Lord's favor. A guard with chainmail and bored eyes stops you. Name and purpose. You open your mouth, realize you have neither, and say, "Traveler, looking for work." He studies you a moment, then waves you in. The steward might need hands in the stables, or the cesspit. Either way, you'll earn your bread. Joke number 1. Medieval job interviews are short, honest, and smell like manure inside the walls. The castle feels alive, blacksmiths hammering, servants rushing, chickens darting underfoot. It's less fairy tale palace and more fortified beehive. You're handed a pitchfork pointed toward the stables and told to make yourself useful. The air inside is thick with hay, sweat, and horse's breath. You work beside a boy named Peter, who can't be more than 12. "You're new," he says, matter-of-factly. "Don't cross the steward. He once made a man sleep outside with the pigs for dropping a saddle." You grin weakly. "Noted." He shrugs, shoveling hay. "At least pigs are warm." You work until your arms ache, but the rhythm is oddly satisfying. Horses snort softly, shifting in their stalls. Somewhere above, pigeons coo from the rafters. When evening comes, you're fed a bowl of stew and a hunk of bread. You eat it, sitting on a bale of hay, listening to the chatter of servants. Someone mentions the Lord's feast tonight, a celebration of spring's arrival. You imagine tables overflowing with roasted meat, honeyed wine, laughter, but the servants' hall gets the leftovers. Finny, a historical fact. Medieval castles were self-contained ecosystems complete with bakers, brewers, tailors, and blacksmiths. Some even had their own chapels and gardens. Historians still argue whether they were centers of culture or symbols of oppression, depending on which side of the gate you stood. You stretch your sore arms, glance toward the great hall, and curiosity gets the better of you. You sneak a peek. Candles blaze from iron chandeliers. Nobles in embroidered robes recline on benches, tearing into spiced pheasant and venison. A musician plucks a lute, while laughter echoes off the stone. At the head of the table sits the Lord, his beard oiled, his cup overflowing. The smell alone could make your knees buckle roast meat, butter, herbs. You swallow hard, remembering your thin stew. Then, just as you're about to slip away, someone spots you. A kitchen maid tugs your sleeve. If you're gawking, at least make yourself useful. They'll need more wine. You grab a pitcher and weave through the tables, trying not to draw attention. But of course, you do. A noblewoman looks at you with mild disgust. Another peasant child. Don't spill. Key. You nod silently, pouring carefully. The Lord glances at you once, eyes sharp as steel. Then he returns to his meal. Joke number 2. You're beginning to think. Medieval nobles treated peasants like background scenery, but not decorative. As the night wears on, as the feast grows louder, cups clink, songs rise, and you notice one man slumped over his plate, snoozing blissfully. The smell of wine thickens the air. Then, without warning, a loud crash, the door bursts open, and a breathless messenger stumbles in, mud spattering the floor. My lord, he gasps, raiders on the north road. The music stops. The Lord stands, face hardening. Sound the watch. Arm the men. The great hall erupts into motion. Nobles shouting, servants scattering, guards rushing for weapons. You freeze, clutching the empty pitcher. Peter appears beside you, eyes wide. They'll close the gates soon. You run with him, heart pounding. The courtyard is chaos. Torches flaring, horses stamping, soldiers shouting orders. You dodge between them, heading for the stables. A guard spots you. You help with the tack. You don't argue. You grab a saddle, fumbling with the straps. Peter's hands shake beside yours. They raid for food, he whispers, or gold, or just because they can. Outside the walls, you hear faint shouts, then the clang of steel. The smell of smoke cuts through the night air. Historians still debate whether medieval raiders were bandits, soldiers, or starving men pushed past mercy. In times like this, the difference doesn't matter. By dawn, the noise fades. The gate opens again, revealing a field of trampled grass and broken carts. Nobody's just absence. The Lord stands at the wall, eyes distant. They'll be back, he says. They always are. Joke number 3. You realize medieval optimism sounds a lot like modern sarcasm. The day drags on in exhaustion. You shovel, mend, fetch. The castle hums with uneasy energy. By dusk, the fires burn low. And the people inside try to pretend life has gone back to normal. You sit outside the stables, staring at the horizon. The fields glow gold in the setting sun. You think about everyone you've met, the farmers, the merchants, the monks, the beggars. They all survive on the same fragile hope that tomorrow will be no worse than today. And suddenly, you understand. You wouldn't last a day here, not because you're weak, but because you come from a world that expects comfort, fairness, choice. Here, survival is the only luxury. The wind softens. A bell tolls in the distance. You close your eyes. Now comes the quiet. The night settles gently over the castle, and the noise fades until all that remains is the low hum of crickets and the soft flicker of torchlight on the walls. You stretch out on a pile of hay, the air sweet with the scent of straw, the sky spilling stars like silver dust. The hard edges of the world begin to blur. The cold feels less cruel, now more like a reminder that you're still here, breathing, part of something vast and ancient in the stillness. You picture everything you've seen: the muddy roads, the frozen fields, the whispered prayers, the laughter in the tavern, the flickering candlelight over parchment. Every hardship, every kindness, every ordinary breath in an extraordinary age. And you realize that for all its roughness, The medieval world has its rhythm, a pulse. Life here is raw, immediate, fragile, but also stubbornly beautiful. You let your eyes close and imagine the crackle of the hearth from that first night, the one that started this journey. You remember how impossible it seemed to last even a day, but you did. You walked through hunger, frost, and fear. I found moments of wonder in between. So, as you drift toward sleep, know this. Maybe you wouldn't thrive in medieval times, but you'd learn. You'd adapt. You'd marvel. And when the sun rose again, cold or not, you'd open your eyes to another impossible day and keep going. Soft breaths, quiet heartbeats, and a whisper through the dark. You made it.